Have you ever wondered if a heart forged in darkness can survive the light? Can a man who rules an empire of shadows truly love? Or does he merely possess? This is a story about that very question. A story that begins where most fairy tales end, with a desperate flight from a monster. But what happens when the only sanctuary you find is in the arms of another? The rain fell in merciless sheets, turning the city's opulent avenues into glistening black mirrors that reflected a world of neon and sorrow. Serafina ran, not with the grace of a gazelle, but with the frantic, stumbling desperation of a wounded animal. Each gasp for air was a sob, each splash of icy water on her bare ankles a reminder of the cold terror chasing her. The silk of her evening gown, a sapphire prison, was torn at the hem and stained with the grime of the city. A bruise, the color of a dying twilight, bloomed violently on her cheekbone, a gift from the man she had vowed to love, honor, and obey. Her husband, a man of public smiles and private fists. She didn't know this part of the city, only that it was a place whispered about in fearful tones, the dominion of the Falcone family. A place where laws were suggestions and power was the only currency. She saw the warm glow of a restaurant, Il Santuario, its name a cruel irony she was too desperate to appreciate. Pushing through the heavy oak doors, she stumbled into a world of hushed elegance, of clinking crystal and the low murmur of dangerous men. All conversation died. Every eye, sharp and predatory, turned to her. And in the center of it all, enthroned in a plush velvet booth, sat the king of this deadly kingdom. He was a specter in a bespoke suit, his presence a palpable force that sucked the very air from the room. They called him the Shadow, Alessandro Falcone. His face was a masterpiece of cruel beauty, all sharp angles and unforgiving lines, with eyes so dark they seemed to hold the abyss itself. He didn't look at her. He observed her, his gaze an unnerving weight. Serafina's flight ended at the edge of his table. Her legs gave out, and she fell to her knees on the marble floor, the last of her strength unraveling in a gut-wrenching cry. "Please," she whispered, her voice raw and broken. "Help me." "He'll kill me," one of Alessandro's guards, a mountain of a man, moved toward her, his expression a mixture of annoyance and disdain. "Get her out of here." Alessandro raised a single long-fingered hand, and the man froze instantly. Silence descended once more, thick and suffocating. He leaned forward slightly, the movement fluid and serpentine. His voice was a low baritone, a rumble of gravel and aged whiskey that vibrated through her bones. "My husband," she choked out, tears blurring the terrifyingly calm face before her. "Richard Davenport. He said he'd find me. He said he would end me." The name hung in the air, a name of minor political power, a man with connections but no real teeth, not in this world. A gnat buzzing around a lion. Alessandro's cousin, Marco, seated beside him, scoffed. "We don't deal with domestic squabbles. Throw the woman out. She brings trouble." He made to signal the guards again, but Alessandro's gaze, now fixed on Serafina, hardened into something unreadable. He saw the defiance flickering behind her terror, the unbroken spirit in the depths of her pleading eyes. He saw the bruise on her perfect skin, and something ancient and possessive stirred within him. This was an intrusion, a desecration of his territory. Davenport had let his property wander, damaged, into Alessandro's sanctuary. An insult. He rose slowly, his towering frame casting a long shadow over her kneeling form. The entire restaurant held its breath. He circled the table, his movements utterly silent, and stopped before her. He crouched down, bringing his face level with hers. The scent of expensive cologne and something uniquely masculine, something dangerous, enveloped her. He reached out and she flinched, a reaction so ingrained it was instinct. His fingers, surprisingly gentle, brushed a stray, rain-soaked curl from her face. His thumb traced the edge of her bruise, a touch that was both a threat and a promise. "From this moment," he declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent room, his words an unbreakable decree. "This woman and her troubles belong to me. She is under the protection of the Falcone family. Anyone who touches her answers to me." He stood, pulling her effortlessly to her feet. "Richard Davenport will learn the price of harming what is mine." The shock was a palpable wave that rippled through the room. Marco's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with fury. "Leo Alessandro's stoic consigliere," showed no emotion, but his mind was already calculating the cascading consequences of this impulsive, unprecedented act. A Mafia Don did not claim a stray. It was a weakness, a distraction. But as Alessandro Falcone guided the trembling Serafina out of the restaurant, leaving his stunned men and a room full of whispers behind, he knew it was not a weakness. It was a statement. The shadow had just stepped into the light to claim something, and the entire city would soon feel the tremor of his decision. The Falcone villa was less a home and more a fortress of marble and glass perched high on a hill overlooking the city, a predator's nest with a panoramic view of its hunting grounds. Serafina was led through halls that echoed with a chilling silence, past priceless art that seemed to watch her with cold, painted eyes. She was a ghost in a palace, a captive draped in borrowed silk. Alessandro had left her in the care of a stern-faced housekeeper with instructions to see to her needs, a command delivered with the same detached authority he might use to order a hit. She was given a suite of rooms that were larger than her entire marital apartment, with a balcony that overlooked a sprawling, meticulously kept rose garden. It was a gilded cage, beautiful and suffocating. For 2 days she saw no one but the silent staff. She ate the exquisite meals they brought, her stomach a knot of fear. She bathed in the enormous marble tub, scrubbing at her skin as if she could wash away the memory of her husband's hands, of the terror that still clung to her like a shroud. On the 3rd day he came to her. He didn't knock. The doors to her balcony swung open, and he was simply there, standing against the backdrop of the blood-red sunset. He had shed the armor of his suit for a simple black cashmere sweater and dark trousers, a casual attire that somehow made him seem even more formidable. "You are healing," he stated, his eyes lingering on her cheek where the bruise had begun to fade into a sickly yellow. It was not a question. "I am a prisoner," she retorted, her voice stronger than she expected. She refused to cower. She had traded one cage for another, and this one, for all its luxury, felt infinitely more dangerous. A flicker of something, amusement perhaps, crossed his features. "A guest. Prisoners do not receive rooms with a view. A guest can leave," she countered, her chin held high. "Can I leave, Mr. Falcone?" He moved closer, invading her space until she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "My name is Alessandro," he corrected her, his voice a low caress. "And you will stay until I am certain you are safe. Until the man who did this to you understands that what he harmed was precious." His use of the word precious sent a shiver down her spine that was not entirely born of fear. It was possessive, proprietary. He was not protecting her out of kindness. He was asserting ownership. In the library that evening, a room lined with ancient books he had likely never read, his consigliere Leo voiced his concerns. "Alessandro, this is a mistake. The woman is a civilian, a liability. Davenport is a nobody, but he has political friends who could bring unwanted scrutiny. Marco is already stirring the pot, telling the capos you've gone soft." Alessandro swirled the amber liquid in his glass, watching the firelight dance in its depths. "Marco is a jackal who mistakes caution for weakness. Let him talk." "This isn't caution, it's recklessness," Leo pressed, his loyalty forcing him to speak the hard truth. "You claimed her in public. You've tied the Falcone name to a domestic dispute. It's a matter of honor now. You've made her your vulnerability, or my strength," Alessandro murmured, his thoughts drifting to the fire he'd seen in Serafina's eyes. "Sometimes, Leo, the most valuable things are the most dangerous to hold upstairs." Serafina watched from her window as Alessandro walked through his rose garden. She saw him pause, his large, powerful hands she knew were capable of unspeakable violence, gently touching the velvety petal of a deep crimson rose. It was a startling contradiction, this killer who cultivated beauty. It was the first crack she had seen in the armor of the shadow, a hint of the man hidden within the monster. And in that moment, she realized her fear was slowly, terrifyingly, being eclipsed by a dangerous, unwelcome curiosity. Weeks bled into a month, and the gilded cage began to feel less like a prison and more like a strange, unsettling sanctuary. Serafina found a rhythm in her new life. She would spend her mornings in the vast library, losing herself in stories that were far simpler than her own, and her afternoons in the rose garden, finding a quiet solace among the thorns and blossoms. She learned Alessandro's routines. He was a creature of discipline and shadow, leaving before dawn and returning long after dusk. But sometimes she would find him on the grand terrace, a solitary figure staring down at the glittering city he commanded. It was during one of these nights that their fragile truce began to shift into something else entirely. She brought him a cup of coffee, her hand trembling slightly as she offered it. He took it without looking at her, his focus locked on the distant city lights. "You should be sleeping," he said, his voice a low rumble in the quiet night. "So should you," she replied, daring to stand beside him at the balustrade. "What do you see when you look out there? Assets? Territories?" He was silent for a long moment, then turned his head, his dark eyes finally meeting hers in the moonlight. "I see a kingdom I built from my father's ashes. And I see 1,000 threats, 1,000 knives waiting for my back." The admission was raw, unguarded. It was more than he had ever revealed. Her innate empathy, the very sensitivity that had made her a target for her husband's cruelty, now allowed her to see past the dawn. She saw a man burdened by a crown he never asked for, scarred by a past she couldn't imagine. "It must be lonely," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. His gaze intensified, searching her face. "Loneliness is a small price for power. Is it?" she challenged softly. "Or is it the highest price of all?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her skin. The contact was electric, a jolt of heat that shot through her. "You see too much, mia cara," he murmured, the Italian phrase a soft caress. "It is a dangerous quality." The next evening, he did not retreat into the shadows. He had dinner with her, not in the cavernous dining hall, but in a small intimate alcove lit by a candelabra. The air between them was thick with unspoken things. He asked her about her life before, not about the monster she married, but about the girl she had been, the dreams she had held. She spoke of wanting to be a painter, a passion she had abandoned. As she spoke, he watched her, his expression intense, as if he were memorizing every detail of her face. "You are mine now, Serafina," he said suddenly, his voice dropping to a possessive whisper that made her heart hammer against her ribs. "Mine to protect. Mine to keep. Do you understand?" It was not a declaration of love. It was a statement of fact, a brand upon her soul. And the most terrifying part was that a part of her, a part she had thought long dead, did not want to fight it. She was beginning to see the man in the monster, and he, in turn, was seeing the fire in the captive. The world outside the villa's walls had not forgotten them. Richard Davenport, emasculated and enraged, began to pull the few strings he possessed. He was a creature of bureaucracy and backroom deals, not of bullets and blood, but his attacks were insidious. A port inspection was suddenly delayed, costing the Falcone family a fortune. A friendly city official was abruptly investigated for corruption. They were paper cuts, annoying but not fatal. Yet they were a constant reminder of the unfinished business. The final message came not through a lawyer or a politician, but through a language Alessandro understood perfectly. One morning the head gardener found it laid carefully on the villa's ornate iron gates. A single perfect white rose, its stem snapped, its petals bruised and wilting. A symbol of purity defiled. A direct threat against Serafina. Alessandro's reaction was not the explosive rage Serafina might have expected. It was a terrifying calm, a chilling stillness that descended over the entire villa. He simply stared at the dead flower in his hand, his knuckles white. "Leo," he said, his voice deceptively soft. "Find him." That night, Serafina was woken by the sound of Alessandro returning. She found him in his study, washing his hands at a small basin. The water ran pink. His knuckles were raw and bloodied. He looked up and saw her standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and concern. He didn't offer an explanation. He didn't need to. He crossed the room to her, his intense gaze never leaving hers. He gently took her hand and brought it to his lips, kissing her palm. "The threat is handled," he growled, his voice thick with a dark satisfaction. "No one will ever send you a dead flower again. No one will ever harm you again. I swear this on my name." He was a monster, a killer. He had just returned from inflicting unspeakable violence upon another human being. And yet, as he stood before her, offering a blood-soaked oath of protection. All she felt was a profound, terrifying sense of safety. He was her captor and her savior, her nightmare and her sanctuary. The lines were blurring, and the heart she had guarded for so long was beginning to betray her, beating not in fear, but in a dangerous, reckless rhythm that sounded terrifyingly like hope. While Alessandro focused on the external threat, the more dangerous poison was festering within his own house. Marco Falcone watched the evolving bond between his cousin and the woman with a venomous envy. He saw Serafina not as a person, but as a symbol of Alessandro's weakness, a chink in the armor of the invincible Shadow King. Power was a zero-sum game, and any affection Alessandro gave to her was power stolen from the family, from him. His ambition, a hungry wolf he had kept chained for years, was now gnawing at its leash. He began his campaign of whispers in the smoky backrooms of social clubs and the hushed quiet of the family's legitimate businesses. "Have you seen him?" he would say to a trusted capo, a wry twist to his lips. "He follows her around like a puppy. He who never let a woman stay the night, now lets one live in his house, in his heart." He painted Alessandro's protection as obsession, his focus as a dereliction of duty. He invoked the old ways, the sacred code of omerta that put the family above all else, especially above a civilian woman who had stumbled in from the street. His words were seeds of doubt planted in fertile ground. Some of the older, more traditional soldiers began to nod in agreement. The Don was distracted. The family was vulnerable. Marco's treachery took a more concrete form when he reached out to the enemy. Using a burner phone, he made a call. "Mr. Davenport," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "I believe we have a mutual interest. You want your wife back. I want my family back to its former glory. Alessandro is compromised, blinded by this woman. He is no longer fit to lead." Richard Davenport, a man drowning in humiliation and fear, latched onto the offer like a lifeline. "What do you want?" "Arrange a meeting with the O'Malley crew. Tell them you have information on a Falcone weapons shipment. Alessandro will have to respond to a threat on his Irish turf. I will make sure he brings the girl. When the shooting starts, my men will stand down. You get your wife, the Irish get a shipment, and I get to clean up the mess." It was a perfect plan. A multi-layered betrayal that would eliminate his rival and deliver Serafina to her tormentor, severing the perceived weakness from the family tree. He would frame it as a tragic ambush, one that a stronger, more focused leader could have avoided. He would be the hero who stepped in to restore order from chaos. The final piece of his plan was to manipulate Serafina herself. He found her in the garden, her presence among the roses a constant irritant to him. "Alessandro is worried about you," he began, his tone dripping with false concern. "He is meeting with some dangerous men tomorrow. He feels you would be safest with him under his eye. He asked me to tell you it was a lie, of course. Alessandro would never willingly take her into a dangerous situation. But Serafina, whose trust in Alessandro was growing but still fragile, had no reason to doubt his cousin, his second in command. She saw only a family member conveying the Don's wishes. She agreed, her heart fluttering with a nervous mix of anxiety for the danger and a secret thrill at being actively included, at being the one he wanted by his side. The trap was set. The players were in position. As Marco walked away, leaving Serafina among the beautiful, thorny flowers, a cruel smile touched his lips. The roses, like his cousin, were about to be drenched in blood. The designated meeting place was a desolate warehouse district by the docks, a graveyard of rusting shipping containers and shattered dreams. The air was thick with the smell of salt, brine, and betrayal. Alessandro rode in the back of his armored sedan, Leo beside him, Serafina seated across from them. She looked exquisite and out of place, a wildflower in a war zone, her anxiety a stark contrast to the lethal calm of the men around her. "This feels wrong, Alessandro," Leo murmured, his hand resting on the pistol concealed beneath his jacket. "The O'Malleys are dogs, but they're predictable. This sudden aggression, this specific demand for a face-to-face, it stinks." "I know," Alessandro replied, his eyes fixed on Serafina. He regretted bringing her. A last-minute decision prompted by Marco's twisted logic that her presence would show Davenport she was truly his. A final power play. "Stay in the car, Tesoro," he commanded her softly. "No matter what you hear," as his men, including Marco and his loyalists, took up positions. The warehouse doors groaned open. But it wasn't the Irish who emerged. It was Richard Davenport, flanked by a dozen hired guns, their faces grim. And behind them, several of Marco's own men slowly turned their weapons, aiming not at the enemy, but at their own. The realization hit Alessandro like a physical blow. Betrayal. From within his own blood. "Marco!" he roared, but his cousin was already melting back into the shadows. The world erupted in a maelstrom of gunfire. Muzzle flashes lit up the twilight, the deafening cracks echoing off the metal containers. Leo shoved Alessandro down, taking a bullet in the shoulder meant for his dawn, grunting in pain but never letting go of his weapon. Alessandro came up firing, a specter of pure, unadulterated rage. His movements were a deadly ballet, efficient and brutal. He was no longer just a dawn, a leader. He was the shadow, the legend, a force of nature fueled by a singular, blinding purpose. Through the chaos he saw it. Two of Davenport's men were yanking open the car door, dragging a screaming Serafina out. Richard was there, his face a mask of triumphant madness, reaching for her. Something inside Alessandro snapped. The cold, calculating leader vanished, replaced by a primal beast. He surged forward, ignoring the bullets whizzing past his head, his world narrowing to a single point, her. He moved through the firefight like an avenging angel, his twin pistols dispensing bloody justice. He shot one man, grabbing her arm, then the other, his aim precise, lethal. He reached her just as Davenport laid a hand on her cheek, the same cheek he had once bruised. With a roar, Alessandro slammed his pistol into the side of Davenport's head, sending him sprawling to the pavement. He pulled Serafina behind him, shielding her with his own body. "No one touches you," he snarled, not to her, but to the world, a promise sealed in gunpowder and blood. The remaining traitors and hired guns, seeing their leaders fall and faced with the full, untamed fury of the Shadow King, broke and fled into the night. The sudden silence was as shocking as the noise had been. It was over. Alessandro stood amidst the carnage, his chest heaving, his suit spattered with blood that was not his own, with Serafina safe and trembling behind him. The ambush had failed. The trap had been sprung, but it had caught the wrong animal. It had caught a lion, and now it was time for the reckoning. In the eerie quiet of the aftermath, with the scent of cordite hanging heavy in the air, Alessandro found Marco cowering behind a stack of crates, his treachery laid bare. There was no fight left in him, only the pathetic whimpering of a man who had gambled everything and lost spectacularly. "You were my blood," Alessandro stated, his voice dangerously low, each word a chip of ice. "My father's sister's son." Marco looked up, his face a mess of tears and desperation, a sneer twisting his lips. "And you let a woman poison that blood. You grew weak, sentimental. You dishonored our name for a stray." He spat on the ground. "She broke you." Alessandro's expression didn't change, but a profound sadness flickered in his eyes, the last ember of family affection dying out. He raised his pistol, the movement deliberate, final. "No, cousin," he said, his voice resonating with the cold authority of a king passing sentence. "She saved me. But you are beyond saving." The single gunshot was a punctuation mark on a lifetime of betrayal. He then turned his attention to Richard Davenport, who was being held up by two of Alessandro's loyal men, his face a bloody pulp. Serafina watched, her hand over her mouth. She expected another execution, another brutal end. But Alessandro did something far crueler, far more calculated. He knelt before the sniveling man. "Killing you is too easy," Alessandro whispered, his voice a silken threat. "Death is an escape. You don't deserve an escape. I'm going to let you live. But I will own your life. Every contract you bid on I will underbid. Every friend you have I will buy. Every secret you keep I will broadcast. You will wake up every morning in an empty house with an empty bank account, and you will remember the night you dared to touch my queen. Your life is now your prison." He stood and walked away, leaving Davenport to a fate worse than any bullet. It was a new kind of power, not just of destruction, but of meticulous, soul-crushing ruin. It was the move of a king, not just a thug. He went to Serafina, ignoring his own men, ignoring the wounded Leo who was already being tended to. He gently cupped her face, his blood-smeared thumbs wiping away her tears. "It's over," he murmured, his voice now stripped of all its harshness, leaving only a raw, protective tenderness. Back at the villa, the silence was a healing balm. The scent of antiseptic mingled with the fragrance of roses drifting in from the garden. Alessandro finished cleaning a small scrape on Serafina's arm, his touch surprisingly gentle for a man whose hands had so recently wrought such destruction. The violence was done, washed away like the blood in his study basin, leaving only the two of them in the quiet aftermath. She looked at him, truly looked at him, seeing the weary man beneath the invincible dawn. She saw the scars, both visible and invisible, that defined him. She reached up, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "You are more than the monster they whisper about," she said softly. He captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. His dark eyes held hers, and in their depths, she saw a vulnerability he would show to no one else. "They are right to whisper," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "I have built an empire on fear and violence. But with you, anima mia, my soul, I feel like I'm building a home." It wasn't a flowery declaration of love. It was a raw confession, a fierce oath of a new kind of loyalty, one that transcended codes and honor and family. It was the pledge of a king to his queen. She leaned in and pressed her lips to his, a kiss that was not about passion, but about acceptance. She was accepting all of him, the shadow and the man, the killer and the protector. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her as if she were the only thing anchoring him to the world. They stood there for a long time, watching the sunrise paint the sky in hues of rose and gold. His dark kingdom now had a light, and her broken spirit had found its fortress. "So I ask you again, can a mafia boss's heart survive true love?" Perhaps the question isn't about survival, but about transformation. Perhaps true love doesn't just survive in the darkness. It redefines it, creating a new kind of dawn. What do you think? Can a love born from danger ever truly be safe? Let me know your most epic romance story in the comments below. And don't forget to share if you believe that even the darkest shadow can be conquered by the light of love.